No matter what spiritual tradition you look at, it is quite common that people want to artificially produce results. They either want to speed things up by taking shortcuts, or they want to only get one specific thing that usually comes bundled together with many other things and has many preconditions even. It is also not rare that people start intellectualizing instead of practicing in the here and now, which is sadly also a kind of meme term by now, as it is so often repeated and often by people who do not really understand what it means. Buddhism is of course no exception to that, and today we want to discuss what natural practice looks like and why it is only the one and only practice that can work. But, as pretty much always, I like to start with a few examples so you know what I am addressing here, so that you have a good intuition, which is very important. This kind of artificial practice that I want to discuss here would be based on the manipulation of your circumstances, for example, to generate good feelings. While surely not all manipulation or fabrication is bad, if it is aiming at sensual pleasures and accompanied by craving, it is definitely bad. So among those would be the pleasure jhanas, various breathing techniques that have you focus on pleasure, relaxation, and calm. And while those can have their place, this leads to calm and will not come naturally, which is very important. You have to perform quite the ritual to get there, and you definitely value that pleasure. Otherwise, you would not do that. There can be places and times where that is good to do, namely when there is external pressure that is overwhelming you, so to speak, and you need the calm so that you can get back into a place of at least moderate safety, so that you can contemplate and practice better. In such situations, calming techniques are fine. There's no problem with that, but you should not mistake them for anything else than that. They are not Dhamma. They are, calming techniques. And when you start repeating your calming technique, even though there's no need for that anymore, then we have a real problem, and you will strengthen certain chains that shackle you to samsara. And while I tend to talk a lot about wrongs and the pitfalls of absorption, you can also do the kinds of contemplation that I often praise in a very wrong way. You can very much contemplate devoid of any connection to your experience as it is right now, as it presents itself. In such cases, you start intellectualizing your practice and start doing it out of craving. You start fabricating it, which again makes it a very wrong practice. And I like to use this word fabrication, strictly speaking, as with craving. You experience with craving, you add to it. You don't leave it bare as it is. You lose the connection to suffering, craving, and the Four Noble Truths right here and now. We always contemplate what is, and not what we want to be in the future or what we were in the past or anything like that. It should be more akin to trying to discover your own experience. Discover what the Buddha pointed out. You want to see that, what he pointed out in your own experience, but you have to do the prior work to even get there. And the last example I want to highlight would be the practice of virtue. More often than not, people interpret sila as following certain rules and restrictions they place on themselves. In doing so, they make the practice very unnatural by ignoring what is actually there and instead just blindly follow those rules. Sila is not as blind as many people nowadays believe. Quite the contrary. The practice of sila is the purification of your mind, and you can also purify it from craving and clinging that is present here and now. And that is the only kind of purification that you can actually do. If you just keep rules, you won't come an inch closer to the Dhamma. All you can expect then would be a good rebirth. For many people that is very desirable, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are firmly intent of attaining the Dhamma, of attaining Nibbana, then that is a very harmful thing. But anyway, based on that, we might be able to come up with a good definition or explanation of what natural and artificial could mean here. The natural kind of practice would always happen based on experience and how it presents itself right here and now in this very moment, because this very moment is the only one that we can truly access. Even thoughts about the future are in the here and now, and memories of the past are also in the here and now. And while this in itself is not enough in and of itself, at least lays the proper groundwork. The unnatural and artificial practice would be everything that loses this connection to the here and now. I cannot really define it more strictly, as there are infinitely many ways to go wrong and practice wrongly, and that can only really be expressed by a negative definition. But the examples from before should give you a good hint or intuition of what the wrong kinds of practices are. And we also have a very good sutta on the topic in the Pali Canon, for example, in Anguttara 11.2. And there's a Buddha states pretty much, Medicants, an ethical person who has fulfilled ethical conduct, who has fulfilled virtue, need not make a wish, may I have no regrets. It is only natural that an ethical person has no regrets. And the person also does not need to form the wish that joy should arise. It is only natural for such a person to experience joy. They do not need to form a wish that rapture arises. It is only natural for them that rapture is there. They also do not need to form the wish that calm should be there. It's only natural that calm arises from that. And it's only natural for the mind to become unified and concentrated in samadhi when all those other factors from before have been cultivated. When you have cultivated the entire Noble Eightfold Path very thoroughly, and all the past factors, the prior 7 factors that you have cultivated over a long time, come together in the state of right samadhi. And this happens completely naturally, without you having to do any of the joy, or any method, or anything extra. There is no need for any meditation method at all. If you do it rightly, you will naturally experience all those states. You just have to discern and notice it, so to speak. But then again, it's not really optional. It's not really like you can avoid a great degree of calm or liberation or unburdening. And the sutta also contains the 5-step sequence that is often discussed on our Discord server, so to get people closer to the actual experience of virtue and samadhi, to the actual experience of practicing the path rightly. Relief naturally leads to relief-born joy. From relief, there will always be joy. And joy naturally leads to a sense of ease and peacefulness. And ease naturally leads to calmness of the body. The body will not be as tense and stressed, as it always is usually. And a body that is calm, in addition to being completely devoid of the 5 hindrances, on the level of views and values, very important, will naturally gather in a state of right samadhi if you also have some wisdom. Otherwise, it's just samadhi, but it's still very wholesome. Wholesome in the sense that there's no craving present. And at no point in this sequence is it required for you to switch your attention or focus on anything like that. There's no absorption necessary, there's no focusing necessary, there's no breathing or breathing method necessary. None of that is necessary. It is just a switching of perspective. And before that, you want to change your perspective as much as possible. You want to understand the fundamental truth. And this process naturally unfolds over a long period of time and not just in a single sitting meditation. The practice happens at all times, the entire day. And you can even not sit and still make that progress. The sitting is not essential. You don't have to do it. What matters is craving and clinging. And craving and clinging are not bound to any posture. So if your peace is only available to you when you sit, then it's not real peace. Then it's not the Dhamma. And most people from modern traditions focus on just a single description of samadhi or jhana, namely the stock phrase. Yet the stock phrase only contains the absolute essentials of jhana and leaves out basically all details. It is easy to misinterpret that, as it's so short, so brief. It is a description of experience of what happens when you have done everything rightly for a very long time. So the entire 5-step sequence I have mentioned before happens way before your mind gathers all the past factors in samadhi. All the feelings of rapture, joy, bliss, calm, and healthiness. Everything happens before jhana, and not because of the jhana. All this is even in the stock phrase due to the seclusion from sensuality on an overarching, all-encompassing level of your entire life. On the level of views, you give up the value of sensuality, and once that value has been given up, jhana will arise. 5 hindrances will subside. To give you a quite mundane example of that, I often like to use to think of the process in terms of an addict. An addict does not know what he gets himself into and must ignore the dangers of his consumption. Otherwise, he would not do it. To escape that state of addiction, he first has to restrain all his behaviors that are related to that addiction, even the subtle ones, where his mind tries to cheat himself, to inch him closer to his drug. Maybe a meeting with friends of his past seems quite harmless, but it is not, because all the memories will come back. And you have to restrain all those behaviors. But you are still addicted, even if you are perfect at restraining yourself. You will still value the drug, and as such you are not free at all. The mere absence of a direct craving does not entail freedom at all. Even the addict is not greatly pressured at all times, especially right after he got what he wanted. He is very calm even. But that does not mean that he's free. It is just that this kind of freedom, the freedom of sensuality, is the only freedom he knows. The temporary absence. This is what the Dhamma is not just a temporary absence. But that is what the worldly people know, nothing else. Yet if he keeps at it, the addict, and abstains longer and longer, he will have time and distance to see what the drug has done to him with much more clarity. And from that higher perspective of withdrawal, he will suddenly be able to notice all the drawbacks and problems with his former behavior. So in hindsight, he can notice the absolute danger and pain of what he has gotten himself into. Yet this can only really set in after he has abstained really long and really makes an effort to look back into it and contemplate it and try to see it as dangerous. If he still wants the drug on the level of gut feeling, on the level of the mind, on the level of craving, on the level of clinging, he will not see the danger clearly, and it will not sink in. Yet if he did the work rightly, he will see the danger, and he will notice strong relief that he is no longer bound by that. From then on, the 5-step sequence unfolds until he arrives at a state of equanimity or healthiness, which is just a very good word to describe it. This is just a limited example, but you get the idea. It is just more all-encompassing when you try to practice the Dhamma. And you are not just free from a drug, you are free from all drugs, as sensuality is the mother of all addictions. In the case of the drug addict, we have seen this process unfold, giving one specific addiction. Getting rid of such an addiction, one by one, would be what the suttas call purification of mind or virtue. You take all the behaviors you have in your life where you are addicted, which is usually something sensual, so to speak, and then you get rid of them one after another. You get rid of all your addictions. Yet to make a breakthrough to the Dhamma, you need to get rid of all addictions on the most general level. And sensuality would be the very mother of all possible addictions. It is an addiction to sensual things of all. An addiction to, things that the senses throw to you. Overcoming this is quite a task, and the relief that is accompanied by that is on a different level. But as you might imagine, you do not have to be in any specific posture to try it like that. You might be just as addicted while standing, walking, sitting, or lying down. Addiction is not something that is related to your posture. Not at all. And that should be very, very clear to most of you, unless you have deluded yourself a bit. But let us come back to the practice itself and how to make it more natural so that this process, progression of states, may just unfold. In general, we can distinguish between two roughly different styles of meditation, namely contemplations, or trying to understand or discern, and serenity, non-craving, or weakening craving. Both of them, as mentioned in the beginning, can be performed in a very unnatural, wrong way, and also in a wholesome way. But before we start with both of them, I want to mention that the suttas do not really make a clear distinction between vipassana and samatha or samadhi. It's all aspects of the same thing, really. All that happens might be a slight shift in emphasis, but not a completely different style or anything like that, no method or technique. Anyway, let us start with serenity or non-craving, through the vehicle mentioned in the suttas. Instead of doing artificial rules and observances, you work with whatever is present right here and now. If there is an urge present right now, dig for its roots. First restrain your action, and then dig for the roots. What led to the arising of that craving? The value that value. The value, whatever you encounter there. You want to really see that there's nothing behind it, that it's not worth holding such a view. Contemplate whatever view or desire you have or find there, whatever sensual view you find, as anicca, dukkha, and as a result as anatta. At a later point, usually, when you are no longer immediately pressured. Because when you contemplate while pressured, you will do it out of craving. And that is, again, sadly wrong, and will only strengthen the entire theme of having to do something. The pressure itself points the way to a view that is always present, that you can dig up and remove for good. You want to dig up the roots, and then craving can no longer arise. You want to apply this method to all sensual views and all values that you hold, and this process culminates in samadhi, as mentioned before. This is what virtue really is. The Dhamma just takes this one step further and also leads to a state where it can never re-arise again. And just a temporary absence of craving does not mean, even the absence of views does not mean that views cannot come back, that they cannot sneak back in. They can. The Dhamma is there so that this does not happen. Right contemplation, on the other hand, works naturally too. So instead of trying to understand artificially, start with whatever is present in your experience right here and now, and examine that. Test that against the teachings that you have received. Your mind will have a natural tendency towards a certain element of the teaching, and you should contemplate what you radiate towards anyway. Try to figure out your role in the process of suffering, and do not lose the connection with the Four Noble Truths. Take what you feel is right, and that is often what is presently arisen anyway. If you skim through the suttas, a few will naturally catch your attention. Just go with one of those and try to discern what those suttas say. In your experience, try to remember what the sutta said and try to discern it in your experience. This is what mindfulness is. Mindfulness just means remembering the teaching in the context of the Dhamma. So you remember what the Buddha said and try to discern it in your experience. That is mindfulness. Make much of that contemplation, as much of it as you can, and you will see the entire Dhamma through such an approach. Basically, any sutta is sufficient for full liberation. Those two things are enough. The Dhamma follows a very simple principle of dependent origination that must just contain two elements. One this and one that, as well as a simultaneous dependence of both things. Our Buddha Gautama offered us countless contemplations, as he even was a genius among self-awakened ones. Other Buddhas of the past often only taught the Dhamma in terms of Namarupa and Vijnana, and that was sufficient for their followers. Today, we have more than enough different pairs of contemplation to suit every character, so just pick that one that resonates the most with you or comes most natural. Natural practice literally just means that you contemplate based on what has arisen here and now. You do not make it happen in your mind. You look for what is there and then try to remember in the present moment what the Buddha was talking about. But anyway, let us now come to the most important parts. First, people do practice artificially or intellectually. They try to shortcut their progress. They just want the bits of the practice that they deem agreeable. They want all the good results and leave out all the work. And right practice always happens based on experience, how it presents itself. And that requires you to walk the entire Noble Eightfold Path. Otherwise, those things that the suttas mention will not arise one after another. They will not arise naturally. Then you have to manufacture them, and whatever you have manufactured is not the real deal. That is not the freedom from craving that the Buddha was talking about. So you have to be very careful here, and do not leave out parts of the practice. If you practice just 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, then you can be absolutely certain that whatever you do is not the Dhamma. The real practice happens all the time. Craving and clinging are not tied to any posture. They happen all the time. Your intentions are always tainted by the 3 unwholesome roots. And you have to be very careful not to fall for that. You have to restrain your actions on the bodily, on the verbal, and on the mental level all the time. Do not lose sight of suffering and the role you play in its arising. Right here and now, you want to discern what you are doing that leads to your suffering. That is the understanding of a Sotapanna once you have perfected it. But anyway, this should be enough for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like and subscribe and to the YouTube stuff. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.